Hello everyone! I have a special announcement today. So actually I adopted Charlotte. She was my second foster cat. I got her back in October, but she's been a very special kitty. Hello everyone! Today I have a very interesting video topic, as you can probably tell from the title, but we're going to discuss salaries and compensation as a technology consultant. Honestly, this video is very geared towards if you're a college student and you probably don't have the resources of what exactly is out there, because I know that for a fact when I started I was like so confused, like what is salary and what is hourly? What is the difference? Like even when I was talking to people that are older, they didn't exactly explain it in the way I could understand. So today I'm really going to break it down into like what exactly you can expect. I'm also going to be showing a report that Management Consulted did of 2021's consulting salaries, and that also includes Accenture's. So I'm also going to talk about misconceptions as well that you need to keep in mind of when looking at your offer. So without further ado, we're going to go right into it. So the first thing is, what exactly makes up salary and compensation? The only thing I really understood when I first started out, I was like, okay, salary, you get paid, right? But it's more than just that. There's also compensation. So in this case, like it's not just money, it's actually like benefits and whatnot as well. So the first thing is the difference between salary and hourly. And this is where it gets confusing, because if you start out, you may actually get an hourly rate, but you are going to have a salary. So what actually is the difference is that, like, let's say for example, when I started working at Accenture, I was given an hourly rate, but I was actually going to be expected to work 40 hours a week. So when I did ask around, like, so in the times that I work 20 hours, does that mean I get paid for 20 hours? But it actually is, you get paid for 40 hours and then you just have to bill the rest to whatever other activities you're doing. So like, let's say training or community activities or anything like that, you just need to make sure you bill it to other things, or just basically you're unassigned or you're not staffed on anything. So that was something that I really had to understand, because no one knew, because especially when it comes to consulting, we don't exactly do like, here's a one size fits all, or like you work overtime or you don't. So it's just kind of a different structure in my opinion. And this is how I understood it, was that you're not going to get paid less because of the fact you're hourly if you work like 10 hours or anything like that. Like I was actually so scared about like, oh my God, am I going to make rent? But it really isn't like that. It's based off of like the salary they give on your offer is based off of the hours that you're going to be working. But the reason why it's hourly is that it's only possible to do overtime that way. So for me, like my entry-level job was actually an hourly job and was overtime eligible. But for now, like I actually am not eligible anymore because I'm salaried, I got promoted. So that's something to keep in consideration, is that when you're hourly, you tend to get overtime. Or actually, when you're hourly, you always get overtime. But sometimes if you're salaried, you may get overtime as well. So you just need to double check exactly how your offer is structured, how your firm is like. So the other one that I did not necessarily know that existed was relocation bonus. And a lot of companies, they give you relocation bonus if you are moving from state to state or maybe outside. But that's something to keep in consideration, because if you are moving from a different state to another, you may want to actually start negotiating for this. So this is also why I wanted to make this video, is that if you didn't know about it, how will you negotiate about it? So this video hopefully will give you a very comprehensive view of like what exactly you can expect in your entire career as a consultant, or maybe tech consultant, because there is one other thing that is, I think, specific to tech. The other one is signing bonus. With the signing bonus, this is typically, from what I've noticed, are entry-level students. So this is where like you may get $10,000, and we're gonna go through the sheet that Management Consulted came up with. It has all of the kind of metrics that have, depending on like what firm you're at and where you are in the country or the US, in the country or in the world. But that's actually something that you should keep in mind, that there's a signing bonus and not everyone gets it. So that could be something you could also negotiate for. So this one comes into the performance bonus. So this one actually is like, you probably have a performance cycle twice, maybe 4 times a year, depending on like what firm you're at. And this is where the performance bonus is discussed. How this works out is usually that they kind of compare you from everyone else in the pool of people that are either getting promoted or not. Almost everyone gets a performance bonus if they do a good job, almost always. However, with like pandemic, some people have gone zero despite doing a great job. So that's something to keep in consideration as well. So performance bonus is not to be confused with a promotion. So performance bonus is typically more like merit-based depending on your actual work. Promotion is usually, and I want to go into this later about like how exactly that works out, is that it increases your base pay when you get a promotion. However, there's also something called a merit bonus as well, or merit increase. So that is when you're doing great work, but you didn't get promoted, so you may get an actual increase to your base pay from that as well. Sometimes as well that they may actually increase your base pay due to inflation. So depending on your firm, depending on how you do it, that actually could be how it's structured. So something to keep in mind, that you should almost always get a bonus, hopefully, if you did. And that is something that you can also get on top of your base pay. So it's not always guaranteed in terms of like how high or how low. Everyone talks about how they get very well paid as a consultant, but sometimes you may get a very low performance bonus, and it's not always about you. Sometimes it's because of the pandemic that you may have a very low bonus off of like an allocation of how well you are compared to your peers, and that's the percentage that you typically would get. So the next one is something I think actually, I'm not sure if you're a management consultant or any other kind of consultant, let me know down below in the comments, is that if you have a hot skill, so like let's say Salesforce, Workday, Oracle, SAP, you're probably gonna get a hot skills bonus. And at first I thought this was just Accenture, but this is actually across all the other firms too. So if you have a hot skill that is key to drive client success and engagement and all that kind of stuff, and most likely probably it will be more focused on cloud, you're gonna get a hot skills bonus. So that is an additional pay you'll get on top. And usually they have requirements you need to fill out. Like if you just have a skill but you don't practice on it, most likely not, you're probably not gonna get eligible for it. But there are some requirements that you need to fulfill to get that hot skills bonus. So definitely look into that. If you are curious about the compensation, ask your recruiter, ask whenever you get your offer, and exactly see like what is the compensation structure. Because if maybe like the hot skills bonus could be a good enough increase compared to like another firm, then that could be something to consider in terms of like comparing apples to apples and know exactly what to expect. But the one thing to notice is that again, it's a hot skills bonus. If it's no longer a hot skill, you may not get that bonus anymore. So don't really rely on just that bonus. Then there's something called retirement match, and this is going more into the personal finance range, is exactly what percentage do they actually match for the 401k. And there is either a traditional 401k or Roth 401k. So think about that too, because technically if they match, it's free money. And some companies actually do have like a requirement you need to stay for like a year or maybe half a year or so to actually get that. So that's a really good perk, because let's say for example you contribute 5% of your pre-tax dollars into your 401k, they're going to match 5%. So that is free money that they're literally throwing at you. That's pre-tax dollars. So that's something to keep in consideration. If you are someone who, like me, actually didn't have any family members that had a 401k, then you probably gonna be very confused. But definitely look up all the YouTube videos about what a 401k. There is a lot of good resources out there. I had to do a lot of research on it too, because when I first found out about 401k, I was like, okay, cool, now what? Is retirement. I'm just like in my 20s. Do I really care about it? But you should, because if they're giving you free money to match whatever percentage you're, and remember to look at your match requirement, because if like, let's say for example, you want to go 3%, but the match requirement is 5%, you want to hit that 5%. Otherwise, you're just kind of giving away that money for free. So look into that as well. So one thing that is also different about, like, this is kind of new with the times, is PTO. So most companies, they kind of give you more of like a set number of PTO days or hours. But when it comes to a lot of firms nowadays, are doing unlimited PTO. But you do need to think about unlimited PTO does not necessarily mean you can take unlimited PTO. One thing that I really like about having a numbered PTO is that I'm in control of my PTO. If I want to go take on PTO, I can. So like, let's say for example, I have like 4 weeks of PTO and I want to use 2 weeks. I can do it just like that. However, if you have unlimited PTO, you still have to actually get manager approval. And if you don't get approval, then it's just kind of like, all of a sudden, like, you're kind of lost your opportunity. Well, if you had PTO on the balance, that is exactly what you could do to actually use it and have no real actual liabilities behind it. But think about it too, like, you don't want to go be leaving during like the crunch time for your project. So be mindful about that. So another thing that I want to mention about PTO is that typically with unlimited PTO, a lot of people don't want to look like they're abusing the system. So studies show that you're actually going to be taking less PTO when you're unlimited than it is when it's limited. So keep that in mind. And you also want to make sure you look into how much carries over. What that means is that, let's say, for example, we have 300 hours of PTO that you've accrued. And when it comes to accrued, think about it as like each paycheck, you get more PTO. You don't necessarily get 30 days or 50 days all at the bat, all when you first start your job. You don't get that. You need to actually earn it. And sometimes you may have like a negative PTO balance for that reason. So this PTO, honestly, is where, let's say, for example, you reach like 4 weeks and you only have like PTO for 2 weeks, is that maybe you've accrued like 50 days of PTO and the actual carryover is about 20. That means you need to use 30 days of PTO before they completely lose it. One thing I think some people forget about is that when you quit your job or you leave your job, they're actually going to pay out your PTO balance. I personally have not gone that experience because I'm still in my first job, but a lot of people I know, like, they just use their PTO like crazy. But if you're still working and you're just there, you could technically save it and then it will pay out that PTO balance. It's not like you're going to be losing that PTO or money. So the other thing that mostly is going to be referring to public companies like Accenture is that you're going to have stock options. So they have something called like the employee stock purchase plan. And what happens for us when it comes to Accenture is that we get like a 15% discount off of the stocks. So usually you have to enroll, and then like it's about 2 times a year where you actually get to purchase the stocks. And we purchase at 15% discount. So what a lot of people I know, they actually sell the stocks like the moment they get it because you're selling at full price. So you make like a 15% profit. But what I like to do, I just hold my stocks because I'm more of like a person that buys and holds. I'm not really a buy and sell person. So that's something to keep in mind too. Not necessarily like truly compensation, but it is something in case you're thinking about like, oh, what are some options to make money? And then this is something that I honestly don't know much, but I do know that managers or leadership does get additional compensation options. Usually it's based off of the kind of impact they make, or maybe their sales compensation, but that's something to, if you are of a higher level, I would definitely discuss with other people that are in the industry that are of manager level or like higher up, like a managing director or partner, because I know for sure they have a different compensation structure. And I'm just a consultant, so I don't actually know about that part. No one really talks about this side in public. So I did want to show the report that I recently found from Management Consultant that does go over the 2021 consulting compensation. So let's just take a look at this first and see what you guys think. But I think a lot of them, they were not surprising, but it does give you a lot more about like what exactly goes into the actual compensation structure. For like the first thing we're going to see is the Bain, BCG, and McKinsey consulting salaries. So you're going to see that it does actually show you UK, Dubai, Canada, Australia, Germany, like all these kind of differences. But again, this is based off of the data that they collected. So it's not necessarily a comprehensive data, but it is good enough in my opinion to show you exactly what goes into it. So first thing you're going to see is the base salary, the performance, the bonus, total cash. And then there's something that I actually didn't notice about was housing allowance. So that's something that you may want to, like when you do your interview or you get your offer, to ask about like compensation, because a lot of times they do ask about like what exactly goes into what offer you want. And you can see like retirement, relocation, and then signing bonus. So moving on to Big Four consulting. So a lot of this, you're going to see it is different across the business units. Sometimes they do that, sometimes they don't. But like, let's say for example, Deloitte Consulting and Deloitte Tech, it is a little bit different. However, I will not say that this is actually the way to say like, okay, I'm going to do Deloitte Consulting because it is higher. Because sometimes you may want to look into like, let's say for example, like when I mentioned about the hot skills bonus, I'm not sure if people in management consulting gets that, but we do. So something to keep in mind when it comes to actually like negotiating your salary, you want to make sure you know everything and ask them. It doesn't hurt to ask, to actually see like what exactly goes into the salaries and compensation and what is negotiable, because sometimes they do have like a whole budget for it, but no one asks about it, so they don't. And going down, you're gonna see notable boutique consulting salaries. We're looking at Accenture here. So again, the Accenture balance, I know for sure that all these consulting base salaries are based off of the average. So the actual salary depends on your location. That's something that you need to keep in consideration, is that like, let's say for example, the salary in New York is going to be much higher than it is in like Charlotte, North Carolina. So you want to look into that too, because like it could be a 30 or 40,000 difference. And depending on your living situations, you want to make sure like, does that make sense, or could that be negotiated? Because sometimes you can negotiate based off of like, if you have a master's degree, or maybe you do have a lot of experience that you want to bring in to the firm that creates value. So something to keep in mind is like all of these other things. Typically, I think PTO, retirement, and signing bonus and stock options are not affected by location. Base salary is the only one that really is affected by the location. If you are thinking about transferring from one office to another, and that is something to keep in mind, because when you transfer, you actually do have an adjusted salary as well. So like, let's say for example, I go from Chicago to New York, I will get an increase of salary. However, is it going to be like a true bonus? Is it going to be like a true promotion bonus? I don't know. Honestly, I haven't personally got like, I never personally have transferred, but I know for sure from people that I know that have transferred, they do get an adjusted salary, but they don't tell you ahead of time before you go. It's really something that like they want you to go because you want to go, and then you get an adjusted salary from that. One thing I definitely want to kind of clear up is that there's like a misconception that consultants get paid a lot. But I do want to talk about the fact that like, if you work a lot of hours and you are salaried, is it really worth it though? Like, that's something you should keep in mind, that work-life balance does matter, because like, so let's say for example, you are working a $100,000 salary and you are working 80-hour weeks. So think about that, okay? What if you're working a $50,000 salary, but you work 40 hours a week? So essentially they do balance out. So think about that too, because that's something that I did not really know coming in, because I know like consulting, you get like bad work-life balance. However, like when you think about the actual dollars per hour, it's not that competitive. If you think about like all those other projects, like the only thing you really get is probably like a reputation, a brand name firm, and you get like all this amazing knowledge and experience, which is great and everything. But if you are trying to judge between multiple different firms, think about that too, because I think for me, like especially, I really value work-life balance. So for me, like if I am working only 40 hours and I'm getting paid well, that's perfect, because I could still do a side hustle or a side gig and still be able to make additional income or do something else. However, if I'm strapped for time, I'm doing like 80-hour weeks all the time and my pay is like then is it really worth it? Like, am I really willing to pull in all this work and risk my mental health for this? So that is definitely a conversation. It's not always about the pay. Sometimes you also have to think about the actual work-life balance and the actual efficiency and like the actual dollars per hour, because I know that like in our Facebook group, the technology consulting community, someone did mention this and I was like, oh, I never actually thought about it in that perspective, but it does make sense after you think about it. And then the other thing that I want to say is that everyone kind of talks about like, ooh, you can expense everything, you know, like those perks where you get to have the managing director or your partner take you out to a very fancy 3 Michelin star dinner. But not all consulting jobs will allow you to actually expense it like that. I know for sure, because Accenture is public, they are definitely not going to be like that. Most private firms do though, but you do need to keep in mind that they still have their own budgets, and they also like, it looks bad if they spend a lot of money too. So you do need to keep that in mind though, that like it's not always going to be like that. If you're trying to balance between like a low salary and that, well, like a bad work lifestyle to that, like I would not keep that as a consideration, because it also depends on your client's budget, depends on like your managing director or partner's budget, or just depends on the actual climate itself. Because like, let's say for example, during the pandemic, people are laying off people, so they're probably not going to be expensing everything like you do, especially in the future. So that's something to keep in mind. So now this is a discussion that I know a lot of people talk about, is how do you actually increase your salary or your compensation? There's 2 main ways. One is getting promoted from within, and I am actually going to be making a video specifically on that, so make sure to subscribe for that. And it's going to be going more into like how to get promoted, how does promotion work in consulting. And I personally have not been promoted in another company other than Accenture, because I haven't been working full time. But I know from other people who talk about how like my friends get promoted, like their process is different. It's like actually, like for example, your work that you're doing at your company is completely different than the work you do with the client. So I am going to be gathering a lot of information from my consulting friends and how exactly do they do promotions. But that's something to keep in mind, is to definitely subscribe so you can definitely watch that video. And so the other way to actually increase your salaries and compensation is jumping firms. Does not necessarily mean you're staying in consulting, could be like going to a different company altogether. But I know for sure that like when you go from one firm to the other, it's like you get a promotion and you get like an upgraded title, so like a promotion, and you get a bigger pay. And you get a bigger pay typically. So it's usually because they're trying to attract you, and a lot of times a lot of consulting firms like to poach you from other consulting firms because of the fact that you have the skills that we're looking for and you are already knowing how to do consulting and whatnot. So that's something to look into too, because so that's why I think it's really key to look at all these reports about like what's the average of salaries and compensation, like what exactly do they offer compared to the others. So that's something to look into, because that way you can truly see, are you getting the good bang for your buck? And you may want to negotiate based off of that. So definitely, if you're thinking about either getting promoted from within, still not a bad way. It is definitely the harder way, in my opinion, because when you start jumping firms, that's when you get a lot of messages about like, okay, like we want you, so but let's pick up a phone and see what happens. And the other one is that really just think about your work-life balance, because it's not always about the name brand, it's not always about the glamour. I think that's the biggest thing to mention, is that like even if you have like a hot pay or whatever, if you work long hours and you don't have the time to spend with your friends, family, and pets, then what's the point? You're working those long hours for nothing. And not to mention, like, think about the dollars per hour as like a way to think about, is it worth it? Because that is something I think is really key to kind of reframe the entire conversation when it comes to consulting compensation. So thank you guys so much. Hopefully this was a very good video in terms of clearing all this up. I know for sure that when I was a senior in college, I was like, what exactly am I looking at? I don't have anyone to look. I didn't have anyone to talk to, because no one exactly knew about consulting. No one had a 401k. No one knew about all this. Like everyone I knew, my family, they all worked blue collar jobs. So they all had like hourly pay. But for this was completely different. So hopefully, like even if you are not even in consulting, hopefully this is also interesting to you. So that way you can kind of understand this a little bit more. So thank you guys so much, and see you guys next time. Actually, she came from a hoarding situation. After I adopted her, I was able to kind of hunt down the original reason, because Best Friends New York actually wasn't the original shelter that found her. They were kind of like the partner of the original one that she was found in. So I did actually ask for information. So she came from a hoarding situation. I don't know if her name was originally Charlotte, but I'm actually keeping her name to be Charlotte. So now I'm down to 3 cats, or up to 3 cats. This is the last one though. I hope so. Or I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Say hi, Charlotte. Hello. So cute.